Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia atau KADIN menyiapkan sejumlah strategi untuk mendukung pencapaian target realisasi investasi sebesar 1.400 triliun rupiah. Salah satunya adalah dengan menggaet Kanada untuk proyek hilirisasi tambang. Wakil Ketua Umum KADIN, Tony Wenas, mengatakan KADIN telah berkunjung ke berbagai negara, termasuk Amerika Serikat, China, Kanada, Belanda, dan sejumlah negara lain dengan bertemu dengan para menteri, CEO korporasi global, pelaku pasar hingga calon investor untuk mewujudkan berbagai peluang investasi. Kanada disebut menjadi salah satu negara di kawasan Amerika Utara yang tertarik untuk berinvestasi di tanah air, salah satunya investasi di sektor hilirisasi tambang. Lalu sejauh apa ketertarikan Kanada untuk berinvestasi di tanah air, khususnya di sektor pertambangan? Sudah hadir secara kami eksklusif di studio CNBC Indonesia, Goldie Hyder, President and CEO Business Council of Canada. How are you, Goldie?
It's good to be with you, Safrina. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure to have you here. So tell me about your visit here in Jakarta. What sort of agendas you have while you are here?
Well, I've been meeting with both government, but also with the business community. I was recently in Singapore, and we thought, let's in the neighborhood. Let's come to Jakarta. You are in Indonesia. You know, you're just held the G20. You were the host of G20. You are now the host of the ASEAN. You're the fourth largest, population in the world. Your GDP per capita is going up, but it's too much of a secret, to be honest with you, around the world, and especially in the Western part of the world. And I tell you, I am just thrilled and delighted with what I've heard so far. But also, you have to act on what you've heard, and there's so much opportunity here.
Yeah. So this is your first time here in Jakarta?
It's my first time in Jakarta, but let's not make it my last.
Let's not make it your last,
no,
obviously.
I think, look, my takeaway from here is if you have diversification plans away from your current trade agreements, your trade partners, if you're looking to go to where the growth is going to be, you have to come to the ASEAN region. And if you're going to come to the ASEAN region, you must come to Indonesia, because it's 40% of the ASEAN, an even larger portion from a GDP perspective, and your growth potential here. Especially with things that I'm hearing about the change of the capital. You know, I had no idea that your capital was changing and being rebuilt somewhere.
Thank you.
The opportunity for that, for businesses to invest in the infrastructure, in the the electrification, the greenification.
Yes.
All of these things are long-term horizons, and businesses should be here to do that.
A lot of potential, and thank you so much for the good sentiments you bring to Indonesia. So, as the president of Business Council of Canada, what are actually the plans for you and also Canadian businessmen to visit Indonesia earlier this year, besides all of the potential that you mentioned before?
Yeah, I think your viewers are sophisticated and learned enough to know that there's a trade agreement that's being discussed between Canada and Indonesia. It's in the fourth round now, so we've made a lot of progress. I wanted to come here in support of our government and your government to be able to say, let's get a deal done. Because as you know, in a world that's got tremendous geopolitical risks, businesses like confidence, they like certainty, and they like predictability, and trade agreements really offer you that. They're really about making sure you have market access, making sure that there are rules, making sure that there are consequences for breaking the rules, and a mechanism by which those disputes are assessed. And Canada is very much a free trading nation. We currently have, and out of 12 or 13 free trade agreements, access to 55 countries and 1.5 billion people around the world. Adding Indonesia would be a very significant increase with your population as well. And we're currently in discussions with India, ASEAN as a whole, as well as the UK. And my takeaway from this experience is Indonesia can jump to the front of the line and get that deal done this year.
That's very good. And you mentioned before earlier about the Indo-Pacific contribution and the cooperation of Indo-Pacific that you also trying to collaborate with, also Business Council of Canada. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, our government just released what's called the Indo-Pacific strategy. It was long awaited. We were excited that it's finally come out. In fact, as I said, came as a part of a trade mission with our government to Singapore, where not just Singapore, but people from all around the ASEAN came there. We're at a dinner tonight for countries from the ASEAN, and really trying to say, what's the story here? What's the message here? What can we learn from each other? And also have some candid, look, we have to have honest conversations. The world is really complicated now. We have to figure out how are we going to work together, and we have to be honest about what we can achieve and not achieve, because our citizens are looking for hope. They want opportunity, they want investment, they want jobs, and they want stability and peace. And so what can business do and what can government do is work together. I think we showed people around the world during COVID, I'm sure it happened here in Indonesia, when institutions work together, the confidence of our citizens go up.
And in terms of promoting hope amidst the complication that the world and the turmoils that economic global is currently facing, what is actually your view towards the economic uncertainty, especially during this year?
2023, I know they say this about every year, but 2023 we believe is really going to be a critical year. We do this in the backdrop of coming out of a pandemic once in a century. We have war that's persisting and may persist much longer. Climate change is a very real and immediate danger. We have, the risks of, some say, recession, short, shallow, long, who knows? But economic headwinds are coming our way. And even though this is primarily a Western recession, it's the United States, Canada, and parts of Europe, there will be a trickle-down effect, right? You might grow slow from 5% to 4%. Well, that will impact your citizens. So how do we minimize that from happening? And a lot of that, I think, comes from, again, good relationships, trade, building an investment environment, depoliticizing investments in countries, building the infrastructure at both ends. Look, it takes two to trade. You can't trade by yourself. You have to make sure that the other side is also doing the things, and we encourage both governments to make sure that we're building the infrastructure that we need, that we're leading the world. I mean, you have critical minerals here. You're 30% of the nickel deposits are right here. You're number 2 in tin. I think you're number 7 in copper. Canada is also mineral rich, top 32, 33. We both have gas. We both have LNG. We should both be getting that LNG to countries that are using coal. You are 45% of your economy is on coal. How are you going to meet your targets? You're going to need to diversify. Nuclear, I know it's not an issue here today, you're not there, but it needs to be. I don't know how you meet net zero targets if you don't bring down your emissions from clean energy. And there's no cleaner energy than what we have is what's called small modular nuclear reactors. So clean tech, ag tech, biotech, fintech, all of these, AI, quantum, all of these things are happening. And for people, that's a lot. What we need to say to them, here's how it connects to you, your life, your job, your opportunity, the hopes for your children and your grandchildren. That's what we're trying to do here is I said, stabilize the perspective that this is going to be a bad recession or it's going to go on. That's attitudinal. Safrina, you know enough to know that you can talk yourself into this. So you have to be very careful. The more you talk about it, the more it feels like it's coming, right? It doesn't have to come. We can do things about it, and good public policy can help.
And moving on to the mining industry, because you mentioned Canada and Indonesia, the similar thing is that we have natural resources, very, very rich mineral resources in both countries. Because Canada has invested heavily in Indonesia, especially in the energy and mineral mining sectors. You know that Indonesia also have this current regulation of downstream policy regulation. You also mentioned previously before. Do you think Canadian investors are well aware of this downstream policy roadmap or directions and are interested in investing on them?
Yeah, I think, look, every country has a right to do what it wants to do with its resources. It has to, of course, comply with trade agreements and obligations it made in the World Trade Organizations and other things. We have had the conversations here about what that downstreaming policy looks like. The idea that it needs to be refined here and so forth, those are decisions for the people of Indonesia to make. What we want to see is how do we leverage the resources that we have as two different nations to help other countries with their electrification agenda, with their need to decarbonize. This is the opportunity for us, right? Like right now, innovation is going to be such a critical component of actually bringing down emissions. Companies are making all around the world commitments, 2050 I'll be zero. But if you ask them, can you map it out for me and show me how you're going to do it? They can't, Sophia. So we have to say, how is the rest of it going to happen? The answer is innovation. Critical minerals will be a very key piece of that. In Canada, we're working on things like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, because carbon is going to be created still. Right? We have to remember the phrase is net zero. Not zero. Net means you're going to have carbon-producing industries,
but also something that compensates and offsetting.
And the balance is supposed to be zero. We're going to be working very heavily on hydrogen. A lot of promise, but it's not a guarantee. It's going to take tens of billions of dollars of investment to make it work and to make it affordable. We're working on small modular nuclear reactors. All of these things are components, and everything requires minerals, uranium, all of these potash for your agriculture. Canada has it. Indonesia has a lot of it, and things that we don't have, you can offer us, and things that we have that you don't have, we can offer you.
So still the key is innovation and collaboration.
Innovation, collaboration, a deliberate industrial policy. What are you trying to do? What are we trying to be? Because the world, you know how many people live in democracy today in the world? It's like 29%. How are we going to, the other side's going to win. And we have to do a better job of delivering results by economic growth and prosperity that's shared.
With international trade, a trusted international trade.
That's one component of it.
In terms of industrial policy and relating to the downstream mining that Indonesia is actually trying to achieve, Indonesia includes its steps by banning the export of raw materials such as nickel ore and so on. So learning from Canada, any lesson learned you can give to us who is indeed an expert in the mining industry? Is this raw export ban policy, do you think, is the right decision? Yeah.
So look, I'm not going to get involved in the internal policies of Indonesia, but what I will say is business, representing business interests from Canada, many of whom are members are operating abroad. What we look for is attitudinally, are governments protectionist in nature, or they believe in free trade? Do they believe in the rules of engagement? And we encourage countries to be less protectionist. And by the way, it's not unique to Indonesia. My own neighbor, the United States of America, is doing it. Right? And we have to watch that. And we have to call that out to say, we're in this together. In the case of climate change, even if Indonesia was able to reduce all its emissions, it could come from a country right next door to you if you haven't helped them figure out how to bring it down, right? So sharing, collaborating, partnering, working together in a very deliberate way to solve global problems requires a global effort. It can't be done just by one country in and of itself, right? No one could control COVID all by themselves. The emissions are the same way. So minerals are a component of how we're going to be able to deal with the climate change. We need to figure out how it is that we're going to help everybody else that doesn't have all these minerals, and that's going to require trade and sharing.
Trade and sharing again, that's the key. But then again, about the raw materials such as nickel ore and so on. Do you think it's more of a protectionist side, or probably something that adding more economic added value for emerging markets like us?
I will say, as a country that exports oil and has it refined in another country, there's been much discussion as to why it doesn't happen in Canada. I think those are fair public policy discussions to be happening in the internal affairs of a nation. What we're advocating for is in a global community, right? In a global community that's trying to have more supply chain integrity, that's recognizing the need to work together. It takes 1,400 parts to make a ventilator.
Wow.
So if you want to make a ventilator by yourself, good luck. You can't. You have to figure out where you're going to get these other parts. And so critical minerals are no good to you if they're not being used by somebody else. And this is where I think the collaborative approach, the non-protectionist approach, it's fair game for a country to decide what it wants to do, but the markets will also determine what they like and don't like, right? And they will move to countries that are more free traders, in my opinion.
Still in this downstream policy regulation, so Indonesia is, current administration in Indonesia has this very ambitious goal on building a holistic downstream mining policy industry and also electric vehicle system. How do investors from Canada also interested on investing in this sector, and how do you generally see it?
Yeah, I think the most important thing here, and this is not a unique situation in Indonesia, it happens in every part of the world. Do we have the infrastructure that will be required if you have everybody using electrical vehicles? Most countries, Safrina, don't. We don't have the grids. We don't have the power. So
that's the challenge. That's the utmost challenge.
I mean, we don't have in many cases, if everybody on the streets of Jakarta was driving an electrical vehicle tomorrow, in my 2 days, I haven't seen one charging station anywhere.
You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it. Maybe I'm not looking close enough.
But you're around Jakarta.
I know, but I'm in Maine. I haven't seen it. Right? They should be visible everywhere. They should be visible everywhere. So to get that infrastructure in place is a long play. See, the thing we have to remember here, and this is where I think, again, a business show will allow me to say this, but it's a transition.
It's a transition.
It's not on-off.
It's a baby steps going there.
Look, if we can take quicker steps, we should, because climate change risks are very real. Look at the amount of rain you get here, the flooding you get here. Why are you moving your capital city? So it's very real. We should do that. But it is a transition. It has, again, the net point that I made earlier, but also the transition point. It's not either or. We're going to need to use, our goal here is to help you get off coal. Right? That's a good thing if you're able to reduce
in terms of cleaner energy goal. And still regarding business in the mining sector, Goldie, the Indonesian government wants to have more share ownership in foreign mining companies in this country. The goal is to add more value to Indonesia itself. And what do you think is your opinion about this?
Yeah, I think, look, many countries take sort of what we call a P3 model in Canada, a public-private partnership. And certainly over critical minerals, it wouldn't be, Indonesia would not be the first country to put rules and parameters in place as to who can invest, what can happen to the minerals, how do they get moved, where do they get refined. All those are, like I said, those are fair conversations for the nation to have internally. All I'm saying is that when you have a product that the world needs, right, the best thing you can do is get it to market. And to get it to market in an effective way, in an efficient way, in a cost-effective way, and making sure that happens should be in your national interest, because it's going to help your economy grow. businesses want just to know predictability, stability, that there is going to be supply, there isn't going to be protectionist measures. We saw, it's not unique, as I said, it happens around the world. In the middle of a pandemic, you know, people were trying to hoard everything. They're trying to say, I don't want to give away vaccines, I don't want to give away masks, I don't want to give away ventilators. How does that benefit people? We must recognize that things like climate change and pandemics respect no boundaries, no borders.
And it is a collective goal.
For sure. They say hashtag we're all in it together, but then they don't act that way. So we're forcing governments and businesses and others that we must act in a collective interest, because self-interest may lead to harm.
And in very basic, fundamental and foundational level, what is actually something that could trigger and catalyze this international and collective cooperation between one collective goal?
Yeah, I think, look, in all of my travels, and I spend a lot of time traveling, particularly when I'm not in North America, in Asia, what I would say to you is the challenge of our time is climate change, not breaking news. Yeah. However, trying to do it by yourself, trying not to figure out how to work together, the innovation that's going to be necessary, the capital that's going to be necessary has been estimated recently as the entire GDP of the world for this transition to be done successfully. Doing it by yourself is a non-starter. We need to cooperate, we need to collaborate, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we act rationally, we act with the facts, because in some cases, you know, special interests and others have just overwhelmed the political discourse and the public discourse as if everything can be done tomorrow. It's going to take some time. You're going to need oil and gas. You're going to have it, right? You're going to have to you know, wean yourself off coal. We're going to have to come up with innovative ways like hydrogen and SMRs and all these other mechanisms. Those things take significant capital. They're a risk. We're willing to take those risks. Government should be a partner in taking those risks. And then bring them to market.
And in terms of, as you are the president of Business Council in Canada, and also between Indonesia and Canada, bilateral relation, Canada Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the CPA, with Indonesia is still in progress. What are your hopes for this bilateral agreement going forward?
Let me tell you in simple English, let's get the deal done. That's my hope. Let's get the deal done. It's available to be done. As I said, we have some significant trade agreements that we're negotiating today. Canada's a veteran of trade negotiations. We know how to do it. I'm optimistic that Indonesia and Canada can sign that trade deal in 2023, which would mean you possibly could be ahead of India, ahead of ASEAN, ahead of UK. And remember, in business, right of first mover. You get in first, you're in here to stay. Right? My message to people here, and when I go back home, will be, you ignore Indonesia at your own peril. This is a country to watch. This is a country to be in. This is a country to see a long-term investment future because of the population, because of your need for infrastructure, because of your, you know, you're relocating or respectively building a brand new city, right? And everything, and your proximity, the importance for you in ASEAN, the importance for you in terms of population, your critical minerals strength that you have, democracy that you are. It is surprising to me how little is known about Indonesia around there. I don't know what the reasons are for you. Maybe it's because you have enough business here, 700 million people in the ASEAN. You're obviously have a relationship with China and so forth. But more people outside of this region need to look here, and when they look here, they cannot help themselves to consider the opportunities. I sound like a salesperson for Indonesia, but in 48 hours, I've been convinced of the opportunities and the possibilities, and most importantly, the chance to do things together. To partner. You need foreign investment here. Right? But here's the last thing I'll just say on this question, is the importance of not just making it all about trade and trade agreements and, you know, all that stuff. Let's talk about people just for a second here. We need, you know, Canada's bringing in 500,000 immigrants a year in a matter of a few years, per year. You know, the population of Indonesians in Canada is less than 20,000 people out of 38 million. Most of your students go and study in America when there's as good of an education, in some cases better, for much less cost, in a safer country, in a multicultural environment, respects, you know, who you are. You can come to Canada and do that. So we should be, it's on us too. We need to promote Canada better. But in Indonesia, you need to think beyond the United States for some of these things. Our cultural ties. You know, our business-to-business ties. There are Canadian businesses here. In this city, you will see signs for Sun Life and Manulife, just as an example. I wonder how many people who see those signs realize those are Canadian CEOs, members of the Business Council of Canada, but those are Canadian companies. How many people know that? You know, we have to make sure that they're aware of that. So I see really opportunities for people-to-people ties, for business-to-business ties, yes, government-to-government ties, cultural ties, trade is one component of it, cultural exchanges. Let's get going is the message.
Let's get going. Let's get the deal done and two more stronger ties between Indonesia and Canada.
I think it's a win-win situation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Goldie, for coming out here in CNBC Indonesia. A pleasure to have you here, and I hope this is not your last visit here.
Well, it's my honor. Thank you for having me, and I hope to have me come back.
Of course, an honor to have you here, Goldie. Thank you so much.